And welcome to all of our viewers. Thank you for joining us for today's episode extras. I'm joined by Jeff Scher. And as always, you can find more content for our show on our website. That's at aotashow.com. Jeff, thank you so much for sticking around and talking a bit more with us.
My pleasure.
We had, I thought, a really interesting conversation earlier with the panel, just digging into so many complex issues around technology in the classroom and kind of the new world of teaching and learning that we live in today. And you, as a faculty advisor at UCLA in the teacher education program, specialize in critical media literacy. And that might be a term that some of our viewers maybe are not exactly familiar with. I'd love for you to tell us a bit about your work and kind of what you do and why this is so interesting and important.
Great, well, thank you. So what we try to do really with critical media literacy is help teachers help their students think more critically about all the information that they're encountering, they're using, they're hearing, they're creating, to give them more tools so that they can think about it, understand it, make sense of it, and then also create their own messages in a way where they're being more responsible, where they're also sharing their own perspectives and their own voices.
Yeah, and I know you also have a particular focus kind of supporting new teachers who are coming into the classroom and kind of learning to use tools of technology, but also learning to kind of support students to use them responsibly. Tell us a little bit about like what that work looks like and how you engage with new teachers.
So we have a course at UCLA on critical media literacy where we help our new teachers kind of struggle and wrestle with the ideas of what's different today in the 21st century in terms of the information and the messages that are everybody that are receiving and also so many people are creating. And we do this basically through using a framework. Comes out of the theoretical school of cultural studies. And the ideas are to look critically at information, to understand that all information has a bias, that simply having a bias is not the problem. The problem is understanding the bias. Because a lot of times we fall into the myth of thinking something's objective, and when we do that, we lose the ability to recognize what is the bias behind the information. And we look at advertising, we look at movies, music, social media, so many of the different ways where our messages are being told. Because humans historically have always been storytellers for thousands of years. That's how we've passed on our traditions. And now it's more important than ever because our dominant storytellers today are typically very large corporations with tremendous power to push out the same messages that they want for commercial purposes, as opposed to the old storytellers, which were the seniors in the community, in the village, who always had the priority of making sure that their community, their culture continues.
Yeah, and who are not trying to get us to consume a particular version of some product, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. When I think about the amount of time that most young people, and grown folks for that matter, but especially young people who are impressionable and still developing brains, the amount of time that they are exposed to these images, to different forms of media, to different forms of corporate advertising, and the amount of kind of decisions that if they're thinking critically, they would be needing to make or consider on a daily or hourly basis is pretty extensive. So, this sounds like not only interesting, but also like basic life training that
it is, absolutely. Yeah, and especially as these new messages are so highly constructed. I mean, there's so much money that goes into just a 30-second commercial that most students aren't really prepared to think critically and to be able to unpack these things. So we need to help them with new skills that we really didn't need so much, a couple decades ago.
Yeah. So to maybe go a little further down this kind of line of thinking, we live in this era today of, fake news and alternative facts and Russian bots. And what at least used to be thought of at least as reliable sources of information, that marketplace is just flooded with sources, and the pressure to discern between good and bad information is on kids, right? Is on us as individuals and in our own device. And so I'm curious to hear your thoughts about like how we as educators should be equipping students to learn to live and function in this kind of world.
Right. No, it's a big challenge, and still, it's a kindergarten standard to be able to separate fiction from nonfiction. But it really isn't.
Yeah.
It's not so easy, even for adults. We see that, with the fake news that's been going around the social media, and so what we need to do is really help our students develop that critical consciousness, that skepticism, to be able to start questioning and asking about the information. How was it constructed? Who constructed it? What's missing from this message? Who's benefiting? Who's losing out by this message? And one of the key ideas we push is to help teach kids about triangulation, about finding different sources of information to be able to see what's most likely to have happened. Because just one source now, you don't know. It's too difficult to know the validity of any single source. So we need multiple sources. That's something I wish our president would look at when he thinks about climate change.
Yeah.
Because if you triangulate the science and the data about climate change, it's not a question. It's very obvious that the climate is changing because of human CO2 emissions. But that takes looking at information through a critical lens.
Yeah. Yeah, there's two things you said there that are kind of blowing my mind right now. One is the fact that separating truth from fiction is a kindergarten standard. I'm wondering how many university graduates in this country are still struggling to demonstrate mastery over that kindergarten standard. So we'll just let that speak for itself. And then I think what you just described almost sounds to me like, like the work of journalists, right? Sort of sourcing your story and vetting sources. And it's making me imagine us needing to, or having sort of the burden of needing to operate almost as our own independent journalists in this day and age to really seek truth.
Absolutely. And journalists have in the past been a very important source, and they still are. But even information from the best news source, most journalism in America is corporate, and it has economic interests. And so it's not a simple, liberal, conservative issue of bias. It's much more about a corporate bias that goes into everything we see. But this bias is everywhere. It's even in, like I mentioned earlier, in the algorithms that search engines are based on.
Yeah. So you're someone who obviously has done a lot of research and writing and thinking about this issue. And I'm sure there's lots of people who rarely think about this issue and just kind of go about daily life. What are we not asking about these issues of critical media literacy that you think we should be asking or thinking about?
So we use a set of questions when we're working with our teachers to be able to help them pose these questions to the students. It's not about telling people what to think, but really it's about asking deeper questions. Some of these questions are, who created the message? Why did they create the message? What different techniques did they use to create the message? How are these different techniques positioning us as we're reading or looking at the message to feel or think differently about the information? And one of the big questions is trying to ask, who do you think is benefiting from the information? Who do you think is being hurt by the information?
Yeah, those questions actually stand out to me because they seem very similar to the kinds of questions that many English teachers, at least secondary English teachers, ask their students to think about when reading, Shakespeare or Toni Morrison or some fiction, right? And I'm hearing you make sort of slight pivots on them and saying we need to be asking these questions about all information we're consuming and exposed to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So You specialize in kind of unpacking and examining issues of race and gender in the media. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about that aspect of the work in particular, some of the things that maybe you're working on with teachers to bring that lens to the work in the classroom.
So one of the things we try to help teachers, help students, is to question who's benefiting and who's being hurt. And they're big ideological structures that are very hard to see, like patriarchy, like white supremacy, like sexism, homophobia, that students really need help to unpack and to start to recognize, because they're so common in our society that we often don't question them. And so we try to do is focus on different topics in different ways where students are creating media and asking them and challenging themselves about, what does this mean? Where is the equity? What are the biases that are implied? One example, there's a wonderful website that uses examples of toy commercials for Legos, where it has commercials that are marketed towards girls and commercials that are marketed towards boys. And it gives you the opportunity to put an image, the video from one commercial over the soundtrack from the other commercial. And it's a wonderful way where students can see, students at a very young age, just how the social construction of gender is being communicated within a toy commercial.
I am not a parent at this point in my life, but every holiday season when I do a fair amount of shopping for kids in my family and friends' kids, I think there's probably no space in our society that is instantaneously more visually starkly gendered than the toy section at any Target or Walmart across the country, right? Like,
absolutely.
You walk in the pink aisle
and blue
and you're bombarded, right? And you walk down the like race car, toy gun aisle and you're bombarded in a different way.
Right, and part of that construction also is very problematic in terms of the way violence is gendered for boys. And that's something we really need to look at, is that it's not just simply the different things, that some like this, but it's a very problematic construction of boys. To be male means to be violent.
So maybe with that thought in mind, as a closing question, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts about, if you were king of the education world for a day, what are the things that maybe we're not doing a good enough job with, in terms of preparing our teachers or helping our teachers help our students? What should we be doing a better job at in order to help address some of the issues that you've very eloquently surfaced today?
Well, I think we definitely need to help prepare teachers better to ask critical questions, to help their students ask critical questions. One of the best ways, I think, for doing this, for students to really kind of come to these realizations, is by empowering kids to create media. When kids are taking pictures, when they're getting down low and photographing from a low camera angle versus shooting from a high camera angle, they start to really understand the way power can be represented simply in a photograph by just a different choice in the level from where you take the picture. There's so many parts of this that sound really complex, but once you start doing it, once you start creating, they make more sense and it's easier for kids to see. And so I think a lot more, if we can have kids producing, creating media in ways where they're asking these questions and looking at issues of race, class, gender, I think that's a wonderful start.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Really appreciate your time and your insights in today's conversation. I've been joined by Jeff Scher, faculty advisor at the Teacher Education Program at the UCLA Graduate School of Education and Information Studies. And for more information about our show and episode extras, please visit us on our website. That's aotashow.com. You can also check us out on Facebook. That's facebook.com/AOTA show. And for those of you who are more interested in the audio version of what we have, please check out our podcast and subscribe. We're available on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right.